What's up, folks? Welcome to FoundFlix. Today we're looking at the continuing saga of our favorite killer Creep in Creep 2, picking up a few years after the events of the first film, where Sarah, a video artist who creates shocking stories, realizes that she has made a grave mistake when she meets a serial killer in a cabin who wants her to document all about his long-held secret as the biggest unknown serial killer in America. It's a pretty vague synopsis, and it is definitely worth watching the first film before the second because it helps really show us what the filmmakers were going for with this sequel. And if you haven't checked out my video on the first film, do it to it, bud! Because Creep 2 is kind of an inversion of the format of the first film, and was an extremely creative way to continue the story in an organic and interesting way, rather than repeat the setup of the first film where our killer finds another victim and plays more pathological liar slash host to his prey. That might be what we expect. But here, as Joseph, now going as Aaron, finds himself in a very different state of mind than when we first met him, having essentially a midlife crisis, and finds that killing doesn't provide him the thrill it once did. This provides our man Mark Duplass with a whole new perspective and insight to the character, and he's actually quite forthright about who he is in contrast to the first film. The problem is that she doesn't believe him. This flip-flop of the first is also done in another important way, where his newest videographer, BFF, and potential victim Sarah is a lot different than the timid and naively kind Aaron of before. With Aaron, he would constantly push him just to get a rise out of him, and knew that he had his victim clearly exactly where he wanted him the entire time, and obviously got sick amusement out of pushing him further and further over the edge. However, Sarah, on the other hand, wants something from him. For her show, a real serial killer, or even just a delusional weirdo that calls himself one, would be the ultimate episode of her web series Encounters. So here, in a lot of cases, she's the one pushing him, and seems to actually make our killer uncomfortable and kind of loses dominance in response to her surprising behavior. It's all really interesting, and just like the first film, is still quite hilarious, and this is all thanks to Duplass's performance. He kind of rules in these movies. Perfectly creepy, uncomfortable, and somehow also warm and friendly, while still having an undertone of, oh dang, this guy could definitely kill me at any moment. So let's check in with our Creep's newest adventures in the Creep 2, and a surprising encounter with Sarah, the quite substantial history and backstory to the character that we are given, and breaking down the many twists that in the end sets us up for another even more terrifying showdown. From the very opening of Creep 2, we start to understand a lot more about our serial killer pal, and that he seems to have a kind of routine that he follows with each of his victims, although done slightly differently this time, as this time the creep has befriended this guy Dave without any indication of him being a killer. The young man Dave is disturbed by a box delivered, inside a stuffed baby wolf plush toy and a camera jammed inside, along with a disc marked "Watch Me," just as he sent to Aaron at the end of the first film. He's joined by who was once called Joseph, hearing him creepily whistling before entering, but now has taken on the moniker of his previously deceased best friend Aaron, and this time has made it seem to David that he is an innocent third party to a stalker that he is dealing with and sent the box, rather than it being more of a direct threat as it was with Aaron. Our first indication that things have changed for our killer since we saw him a few years back. Aaron keeps playing innocent while Dave describes the weird DVDs that have been sent to him, pretending along with an "oh no David, this is your home," when revealing that it's happening again. A rattled David goes to get a beer, and only now does Aaron drop the axe, smirking to the camera when left alone, bringing it with him to the kitchen table. There does still seem to be a through line of Aaron pushing nice people to the brink, David here asking what's going on with him, and Aaron is taken aback by just how awesome he is to ask about how he's doing when he's dealing with all this crazy stalker situation, again indicating that David is nice to a fault, just like the real Aaron was prior. But this Aaron admits to being worried about their friendship, thinking that they were meant to be best friends or even soulmates, but ultimately is disappointed, thinking if it's not destined for greatness, they might as well end things here. He then starts piecing things together for the clueless David, asking if he thinks it's weird these discs started showing up right around when they first became friends, and the situation finally dawns on David who is behind it. Aaron sighing, he wanted to commemorate their friendship with a beautiful 80-minute film, but ever since turning 40, he continues, while pulling out a knife, admits to feeling that something is wrong, finding he has no inspiration or joy, and slits David's throat glumly, wondering what's wrong with him and taking a drink. So this opening scene tells us quite a bit about how Aaron is doing now, clearly having lost the spark that he got from his demented cat and mouse game with his victims, and is going through a kind of midlife crisis, desperate to hold on to that thrill he gets from killing that has left him. And perhaps this is why he tried things differently with David, hopefully by shaking up the formula that might be the answer to his problems, which he will get a lot more than he bargained for with his newest friend about to completely change his life. We meet Sarah, who is the host of a Craigslist encounter-based web series, finding people online with strange and interesting stories and attempting to bring them to light via her show, to finding something that the lonely could empathize with. But the problem is, while certainly weird and quirky, giving glimmers of what she's searching for, the audience isn't biting, getting a measly 9 views on her latest episode. Woo, I feel you, girl. And the failure is starting to get to Sarah after so many misfires, doing a sad introduction for her final episode, calling it "My Failure," she laments. But the next day, she finds a new Craigslist ad that has her in better spirits, which sounds decidedly strange as well as quite vague. Looking for a videographer with mention of fans of Interview with a Vampire being a plus, and let's go deep together. And we can already pick up on this being Erin behind the ad. She texts and gets an immediate response, asking if she scares easily. No, she replies. He asks her name, and she almost types a fake one, but decides to use her real one anyway, them responding that that's the name of his favorite song and asking to meet. Just like that, she's off to meet Erin at another remote location, mentioning that she's been driving for 3 hours now and finally makes it to his house. Naturally a different rental house, as he must utilize a different one for each victim. She records an intro for this new episode, admitting that she doesn't know what she's getting herself into, and that maybe she normally wouldn't do this, but maybe that's why the show has been sucking so much, feeling she must push herself out of her comfort zone, concluding with a peppy, "Let's see what happens." "Oh, we will indeed, young lady." She finds the front door open, and it appears empty until hearing a blender whirring in the kitchen. Seeing since the opening even with David, Erin is looking a lot different now, fully immersed in his midlife crisis with longer hair and scraggly beard. He offers her a smoothie, which she accepts, saying it's good, him joking that it's poisoned, and introduces himself. When she says her name, he realizes she used her real name and thanks her for the honesty, asking for his typical hug to break the ice. He likes that she's already filming, as they have to keep the camera on to keep the magic, feeling they already are forming a bond. She gives her work history as a wedding videographer saving up for grad school, and asking what he does, he outright admits to being a serial killer. Although he technically feels he's more of a murderer, the problem being he's killed just too many people, 39 in fact. He then opens up about his malaise after turning 40, that he no longer trusts his instincts and is worried that he might have lost what made him great. He reminisces that he used to be able to meet a man at a bar, put a knife in him and gut him open, and that the universe would reveal itself to him inside, finding it beautiful. For him, killing was his religion, but after so many years now feels more like a job, which saddens him to his core. Although he was given some fresh hope when reading an article about filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola in his later years, who said he hadn't made an original film since The Conversation, which is really good if you haven't seen it, and wasn't sure if he was capable of that anymore, but wanted to keep trying. Erin finds this motivating. A man in the midst of his artistic decline isn't running from it, but rather embracing it. His idea is to make a documentary about himself, the world's most prolific serial killer that no one knows, intending to make it tonight with Sarah. He knows it's a lot to lay on her, and tells her that she can leave now with no hard feelings, and offers her 2 things. He won't kill her for the first 24 hours, and will provide to her deepest personal access into his soul, believing together that they can make magic. She's into it, of course thinking that he's full of shit about the whole killer thing, and already thinking that this would provide a very interesting subject for her show. What's really interesting to me is just again how drastically different Erin's demeanor is here compared to his time with the real Erin. Here it seems that the facade has dropped entirely. He appears to not be lying or playing pretend with a fake tumor story or any of that kind of stuff. He seems to be 100% honest here, well except for his name, which is such a stark contrast to his character previously. Thusly, it feels that we really are getting a lot more of an honest look into the killer and what makes him who he is. Again, a pretty interesting flip there character-wise from the first. Middle-aged, sure is a bitch. At least at first, Sarah has no reason to believe his story of being a killer, and almost to quickly prove his identity, shows her footage of real Erin's murder from the end of the first film. She's confused. "Oh, is that you? Oh, who's that?" "My friend," he says, and shushes her, telling her good things come to those who wait, and starts whistling, followed by his infamous Peach Fuzz theme song, just as Erin gets whacked in the head with the axe. Sarah reacts with an "oh shit" and turns the focus on her, asking what she thinks of this. She mutters that it's interesting. "Did it scare you?" to, he asks. Her turning the tables, did you want it to scare me? Something he obviously wasn't prepared for, hmming at her, keeping it together, and runs off upstairs. Similar to with the real Aaron, the first stage of his game seems to kind of be upping the weirdness to get a reaction out of his victims, and this is the first indication that Sarah is something very different than he's used to or expecting, and doesn't seem to have the typical reaction that he's looking for, which continues to become more clear the longer they spend together. Similar to the tubby times with Aaron, it seems that nudity is the next step, going on about how there's a barrier between a man and a woman, wondering what they look like naked, and if they are going to embark on this together, they need to tear this wall down. She agrees, and he removes his towel, showing off all of his naked glory to her, but when asking how she feels, only elicits a "I'm good, you?" in response. He thought it would shock her, but not so much for Sarah, and she even asks for a turn herself, stripping down naked before him, but as soon as doing so, he zooms in on her face, which seems to indicate he's actually the uncomfortable one in this situation. Once again, a flip on what he's used to in his typical dealings. Although when alone, she lets her facade drop, in the restroom freaking out, realizing every red flag imaginable has been raised, calling him highly unpredictable and dangerous, not even 10 minutes before his dick is in your face, but then understands that this is what she's been looking for this whole time, concluding she has to do this, plus is 99.9% positive he's not really a killer. She's still no fool, putting a knife in her boot just in case things go south, psyching herself up with a "here we fucking go" before leaving. He appears around the corner yelling at her, another signature move, although she just giggles, again not what he expected, and tries immediately again to no response. He seems genuinely shocked, vowing to get her at some point, her confidently saying, "We'll see about that." So of course he quickly tries to up the weirdness even more to get to her, driving in his car while wearing the peach fuzz mask. Asking what she thinks about it, she calls it cute, which sets him off, turning off the car, doubling down that he's a cute little wolf. He responds with, "What would you say if I'm a naughty wolf?" Her admitting that from you that would be scary, and pushes again, asking, "What if I killed you and cuddle fucked your head?" Well, yeah, that would be unfortunate, but she still doesn't really seem to break in the way that he wants her to. Now back in the woods, the same ones that he trekked with prior with Aaron, she's the one asking the questions this time, trying to get information about his past, which he dodges, stopping her for a perfect filming spot that he's picked out. Yet to his disappointment, the raging river he remembers is now just a little puddle. Upset as the scene was supposed to have him submerged in water as an obvious Jesus metaphor, and was going to jump off the bridge into the water for the final scene. Irritated that they don't have their big ending or the scene that he was planning, and asks for a minute to think. It's thanks to her reminding him of that Coppola article that puts him back in a positive mindset, and decides to go ahead with the scene sitting in the water, starting at the very beginning in December of '78, the last days of disco in a non-descriptive town. Apparently his past, her noticing that he's waving his arms around all weird, and stops to ask him why, him confidently telling her they're going to CG in a higher level of water later. Okay, sure. Concerned about how his ponytail looks, he wants her to tighten it up, but she ends up redoing the whole thing, which seems a little romantic, and in the next take, this one is interrupted by some birds that annoy him enough to throw some rocks, threatening them if they squawk again. They do, of course, sending him to a fit of rage about ruining his movie, and runs off into the woods. Sarah looks for him, calling him a drama queen, obviously not used to collaboration, and finds several buddy heart symbols carved into the tree just like with him and Aaron, telling us that he's been here many times before. She finds him face down snoring, and puts a hand gingerly on his shoulder. He takes it, asking her not to leave, her assuring him she won't. It appearing that Aaron really is pretty broken down at this point, and genuinely connecting with Sarah, but we do know this guy loves to lie. Sometime later, Sarah addresses the camera, saying that he's shut down since the river and has been playing some 90s jam song on repeat for hours. She considers that she should give him some space, or perhaps she could easily provoke him to get the material she needs, opting for that approach, descending down into the bowels of the dark and creepy house where he's soaking in a hot tub. He wants her to leave, but she refuses, wanting to hear his story, and as seems to be the case so far, gives us more about the history of his very first kill that led him to his murderous path. Back at the tender age of 16, he saw a band perform that song, Sarah Loves Her Juicy Fruit, and felt for the first time that he belonged. He ended up getting a ride from a random stranger who turns out was a killer himself, beating him up and digging a grave for him, but clarifies that he actually loved him, although he was bad at tying knots, getting free and using his hands to strangle the man to death, who apparently had that nervous disorder where you pull out your own hair, which he believes transferred to him as a result. The same for all of his later victims. He would lie naked with them and take a part of them with him, calling killing his reason to live, but now it's gone. Interestingly, his first kill wasn't cold-blooded murder, but in fact self-defense, as the guy intended to kill him first, but obviously in that moment when taking control and strangling the life out of him is when he first felt that beauty that he describes when killing. This first experience opening him up to a forbidden or dark part of his personality that until then lay dormant, leading to decades of victims in his wake. Sensing his hurt, she joins him in the tub, sort of sensually rubbing his neck and shoulders, which he actually seems okay with, groaning as she touches him, and later does a video to Sarah, thanking her for what she did, as it inspired feelings in him, and that he now doesn't know what to do, seeing a knife sitting nearby. He enters into the bathroom and pulls away the curtain, Sarah jumping out, tape all over her face, scaring the crap out of him. Asking how he feels, he screams out primarily and she joins in. As we see, she really has shifted their dynamic completely, and is now trying to elicit the feelings she wants out of her subject, rather than the other way around that he's used to, which is confusing and new for him, I'm sure. After this breakthrough moment, their relationship becomes kind of fun, as the two engage in a game of hide and seek, Aaron counting to 50 and searching for Sarah, going to a barn where she spooks him at the window, him then yelling, "I'm coming for you," her giggling, "You don't scare me," and running after with a knife. Wow, these two weirdos kind of deserve each other, huh? Filming him chopping some wood, she attempts to get some honest answers to more questions, like when holding that axe, does a part of him want to ram it into her face, considering his past? Well, of course, he responds jovially, but then we wouldn't be having the fun that we're having, he says. Thinking further, he divulges that he thought he would die before getting to share his work with anyone. Now I have you, thinking it's kinda cool. Playing pool, she asks if he has any remorse over his killings. A little, he says, but he does give plenty of warnings to his victims to know what they're getting into. Remembering his latest, which he called Buddy, actually the name of his fake kid from the first film, which more sounds like the real Aaron. Referencing how he saw an axe in a tree stump before coming to the house, but still came in anyway, and stayed all night, thinking it was almost like he wanted to die, which definitely sounds like our hapless good boy from the first film. He was given plenty of warning signs even up to the end, but his kindness never faltered even as things got weirder and even more dangerous for him. She asks what about her? Is he gonna offer with a blender? Which he feels is a great idea, but promised not to kill her. Sarah reminding him that was only for the first 24 hours, him smiling devilishly, asking why she'd bring that up, as it will only get her into trouble. Pouring a big old glass of wine, which he refers to as mommy's juice, she asks what he's thinking about. The book The Journalist and the Murderer, which discusses the moral quandary journalists have when having to live and ingratiate themselves with their subjects, showing us that he does at least kind of get why she's acting in the particular in-your-face way she has in order to be able to get what she wants out of the relationship. And really clarifying this, mentions he thought of the book while watching a little show called Encounters, as in he was well aware of Sarah and what her intentions were from the very beginning, chiding that someone that simply makes wedding videos does not carry a knife in their boot, and says that he hasn't been lying traditionally, just playing around with the facts. Not outright lying, the heart and soul are telling the truth, the same truth he says he's feeling from her, assuring her again everything's gonna be okay, and that he's not mad about hiding her purpose. He then pivots to the big question of the day. Does she believe that he's a serial killer or not? She still doesn't, thinking his stories are ridiculous. And even him wanting to do a documentary admitting to his many murders on film seems like a bad idea too, because she could just go straight to the police with him. He calls this a fair point, but showing he has other ideas, says that she won't go tomorrow because by then he'll be dead, and wants her to kill him. He wants to make his big 40th kill something important. Rather than a random victim, what would be better than him? Plus, giving her a murder film where the pupil fells the king, he says, would be quite quite an excellent episode of her show. She's taken aback by him wanting her to murder him, but he's too excited with the idea, running off to fetch his peach fuzz mask, giving pointers on how to use the axe to behead him, just to make sure he legally agrees on camera, but declines any last words as he's talked enough for 10 lifetimes, doing a wolf howl and encouraging her whenever she's ready, but she can't do it, so they try a more so-called passive way utilizing a noose. He'll jump off the ledge, and unless she saves him, he'll die. Even though she says she's not ready, he jumps anyway, and unsurprisingly, she springs right into action to save him, and these two murder setups are finally enough to get her to crack. Aaron coming across her putting on her boots, worried she's leaving, and it sure sounds like it, telling him to fuck off, and is in disbelief that he put her in that situation. He tries to explain retrieving a harness, proving that he wasn't actually hanging himself, so there was no real danger after all, and lays it out that he really likes her, and is just trying to connect with her, but is doing a poor job. And if he was potentially being truthful earlier, he seems to have regained his confidence thanks to her, and is back to his theatrical ways. Him going, "Am I a murderer? No. But a pathological liar disconnected from people? Yes." But promises that he was being honest about their connection, which she bashfully whispers back thank you. Fell right into his trap after all, lady. And to further ease the tensions, he suggests they play a game of 2 lies and a truth, 3 stories, but only one of them is real. She thinks it's about how long he can hold his breath, but it's that he's never slept with a woman, Sarah thinking that he's messing with her. He perhaps reveals another tidbit of his past, but at this point it's hard to know if he's telling her what she wants to hear or being truthful. That he didn't have a normal childhood, having his first psychotic break and was in an institution until 19. And when he got out, split from his family and just missed the boat on ever getting a girlfriend, jokingly referring to that movie Never Been Kissed. She thinks it is kind of weird and decides it's up to her to offer his first. Their connection only grows stronger when he drags her out into the woods with a surprise, which turns out to be a friendship locket. Not just any locket, but the same exact one that he gave to Aaron, even still including their pictures inside, and apologizes for not making her her own, as she was a bit of a surprise for him. This also seems to show us that Aaron, the creep I mean, is looking for another human connection above all else. Someone he can really call a friend. But of course he's also messed up in the head and can't seem to understand that fine line between friend and murder victim. Isn't that always the way? Rushing her and disappearing into the night, she tracks him down to a big hole in the ground, Sarah asking if it's for her or him. He dug it before she got here and wasn't actually sure then, but feels he has it figured out now. He turns the camera to her, pulling out the knife she had in her boot, and asks if she's ready for the grand finale of the episode. He offers for them to stab each other to death and fall into the hole like a Romeo and Juliet situation, but promises he won't stab her handing over the knife. He stabs himself, and rather than follow her into the pact, when he hands over the knife, she runs off instead. Him in pursuit but getting weaker, stumbling along the way. Too bad for her as he has the keys, him yelling there's nowhere she can go. So she surprises him and they tumble on the ground, and after she runs off again, we hear them continuing to struggle off screen. Next seeing Aaron carrying her body, dragging them both down into the hole. But after a few moments, he pops up and decides to crawl out, realizing after all that he didn't want to die tonight, but admits to feeling bad as it was his whole idea in the first place. When offering Sarah, hey, at least it's gonna make a great episode. And here, to me, I do again feel that he's being genuine, longingly recounting how he didn't want to kill again until he met her, calling Sarah his muse, inspiring him to murder and helped him get over his slump, which fits in with his whole weird wanting a friend thing. They really did bond in a very odd way. That hide and seek scene was another level, but the big moment is that he has his mojo back thanks to her. That's funny, that's all I'm saying. Although she's not quite dead, crawling out of the hole with a shovel and whacking him in the back of the head and disappears into the night. Which is also an inversion to the ending of the first film. This time it's the creep who never turns around. We might think that after his revelation that this is Aaron's unceremonious end, but sometime later we pick up with another POV camera shot on what looks like the streets of New York, then seeing that they are following what must be Sarah in the park and on a subway. Sitting nearby, the creep begins to whistle his signature tune, and Sarah instantly realizes who it is, turning to face the camera with an oh shit face, showing us not only was he able to track her down just as with the real Aaron, dang this guy is good, we're being set up for a showdown between the two, and it seems that Aaron, or whatever the hell his name is, isn't quite ready to let Sarah go. I mean, she's his muse after all. But things end before we see how things shake out, and there has been a lot of talk about a third and final creep film, but it has not yet come to fruition. The holdup being Duplass. thoughts. Around March this year, he was asked about Creep 3, and they said that they were working on it, but still considering a concept that they felt was good enough to go forward with, which I really appreciate. With this one and the whole switch up of the first film's format, while still keeping what worked, they kind of built on the first film and twisted it into a new creative direction. Creep 2 is a good one, and I hope that they are able to crack the story before too long. One thing that I thought of would be having another listing set up, but this time the videographer is also a serial killer, you know, and has heard word of the creep, and his intent is to subterfuge as a confused cameraman, and then slowly revealing who he truly is. It's maybe a bit cliche, but I think this would work well with the storytelling format that they've created here. It could even have Aaron saying Sarah is his girlfriend now, but is it a lie? Is it the truth? Is she dead? Who knows? You could just do a lot with that, I think. Just my bullshit pitch there anyway. And that'll do it for this time. Now don't forget you can send me requests for any movies or TV shows you'd like to see me explain by sending them my way on any of my social media accounts at FoundFlix. What did you guys think of Creep 2 and its ending? What would you hope to see in a potential and final entry in the trilogy Creep 3? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.